I talked about the year 2032 and 2033 because that was a year, those years, I believe, are connected to the emergence of Soroth. Now, Soroth is like a very dark being. And I was reading this actually, I think, in an anthroposophical lecture series, and it kind of perked my ears up, I would say like a year ago. And then I began thinking, 2032, 2033, I am sort of feeling something around here. And then I began to think back to how, one of the movements that these different kind of globalist organizations were trying to create was basically a whole new world by 2030. And that they had 2030 on their agenda as being a time when the Great Reset has to happen. So there has to be this great reset of civilization by 2030. And so that got me thinking because, when you actually start to peel back the curtain and look at the individuals that are part of these organizations, you see that they are very aware of the occult. And, it's actually people who are sort of living mundane lives that are not aware of the occult. And people in power use it all the time. I've made that case in my In Plain Sight series and also Mars Mysteries. And so when you see someone like Klaus Schwab come out and say 2030 is an important year, or whoever was spouting that, we need to look at the occult significance of that year, because there's no power to be had in this world unless it is an occult power first. And only when you can harness that occult power, even if it's a fallen power, even if it's a demonic power, only once you can harness that can you create anything in this world, enforce any control, right? So I think that we're going to see a technological revolution begin. I think that one of the things that people are in like power are just shaking, just vibrating to do is a technological revolution, which means that they want to create sort of an energy crisis. They want to, basically destroy our way of life to a certain degree. And then sort of be like, well, the answer is some kind of digital currency, right? Get off of anything real and keep consolidating things into the digital space, right? Also, I think that it's also very important to introduce certain advanced technologies. Now, these advanced technologies have been sort of floated around in the New Age and in the conspiracy community as being extraterrestrial technologies. They're not actually extraterrestrial. They actually stem back to Atlantis and to a earlier epoch of humanity. Now, Dark Journalist has talked about this a lot, so I recommend going over and seeing his Hacking Atlantis and his work around this as well. But essentially this technology is not from another planet, it's from right here. And it's the incorrect conception of time and our history that has created this sort of seeing things as aliens when we really need to begin with understanding the past and the different developments of humanity and why they look different, why they're in different conditions and things like that, which I get into this if you're interested in my lecture series called The Esoteric Keys of Disclosure. I have that on my channel here, so I won't get too into that in this live Q&A. But there are certain technologies that are not from another planet, okay? They are from Atlantis. The science is from an earlier period of the Earth, and they are being sort of brought forward as like this advanced technology that's going to free humanity from energy dependence or whatever. I think that this is what is meant by part of the dream of smart cities, or through the Trump faction like freedom cities. And so I think that they want to create a complete technological overhaul that basically is the Great Reset, but it is going to be pitched a little bit differently. And to be clear, both sides of the political spectrum have to do that. It is a non-negotiable. So if it disgusts you that certain people are associated with big tech has accumulated so much power and so much money, right, that they're going to get behind anyone that's going to win. There's no avoiding this technological revolution. There's no stopping it at this point. There was probably an earlier period where things could have been broken up, but it was not done. And so big tech is a massively, massively powerful lobby. And that's just the reality that we have to deal with. And it'll get behind any winning force and influence the cabinet anyway. So that technological revolution, in the anthroposophical sense, or in sort of the esoteric sense, is like basically paving the way for Ahriman, paving the way for Ahriman's world, and particularly the environment in which Ahriman has to operate. Okay, so Ahriman needs, in order to take the world stage, in order to emerge, he needs a very specific environment created or built for him. Okay, he's not like a normal human being. He's a cyber human being. He's a creature, really, and so that an environment needs to be built for him to operate and for him to basically take his station. Part of that is having all of these satellites in the sky that irradiate us with energy. They basically beam down radiation on us and create a different environment than it would be naturally without them. Right? We have to think about that. The satellites in the sky and what they radiate down change the environment of the Earth. Of course it does. But that also prepares a certain energy, a certain substrate in which Ahriman can operate. And so for the next, 10 years, we are really going to be seeing this technical revolution to prepare for Ahriman to begin to appear. This is my opinion. This is just my vision. This is not necessarily Steiner's vision. I'm just showing you what I have seen, so I'm taking responsibility for that. And so that's what I personally see. And I think that we have to be very careful what we allow. And I think we need to start, anytime people start to talk about like AI, transhumanism, we need to get right to the spiritual reality of it. Okay, we're not going to actually understand the real dangers of AI, the real dangers of supercomputers and technology, unless we can bring in the spiritual lens. It cannot be fully understood from like a material conversation. You've got to get into the spiritual reason why. And the conversation there is that when you have a robot, when you have a machine, when you have a language machine learning program, right, that is a golem. Okay, that's a golem. A golem is like basically a puppet. It's an empty vessel. Okay, when you have an empty vessel, something eventually incarnates into it. So back in the day, in Jewish mysticism, you'd have a piece of clay that you would form into a being, and then you would eventually use that thing as like a magical item or a vessel in which you call in a certain demonic entity or an entity, an egregoric entity, right? Now we are able to create golems like computers and supercomputers that actually can have every thought, everything within them. And now something can enter into that computer and use that intelligence. Right? This is the occult, this is the esoteric reality that makes that a problem, is the esoteric teaching of the golem, and that computers are golems, that spiritual forces, especially demonic entities, because demonic entities need electricity, magnetism, and radiation to exist. Angels don't, but demonic entities do. So what is the safety here that these machines aren't just being created as basically a giant golem and little golems in which these dark entities can incarnate into and operate? That's the conversation, that's the danger. But I feel like people are so afraid to just get into the spiritual and just start the conversation that it just stays at a very low level of analysis. It stays at the materialist level of analysis. No, we have to get into the spiritual analysis of this, because we've only probably got 10 years until on a spiritual level it starts to get really bad. So we have to start taking that on. So the next 10 years, we should begin to have that very important spiritual conversation, because I tell you what, whether you believe in it or not, when you start calling it out, when you start explaining it, it will give you incredible power. It will give us incredible power. Now, we can't stop it. We cannot stop Ahriman from coming forward. We can't stop that incarnation. We can't stop the kind of digitalization and the technological revolution. We can't stop it. But what we can do is we can make it so we are much more prepared, and that innocent people are much more informed. And that is a great service.